I did not expect to spend my 69th birthday alone at a kitchen table in Texas, watching a candle melt into a store-bought cupcake I had bought for myself. That was not the worst part. The worst part was that my son had called at noon to say they were running late, that Brielle had a last-minute spa appointment she had been waiting months for, and that they would make it up to me at dinner. Dinner became a text at 6. The text said something had come up. The cupcake had already gone cold by then. I ate half of it standing at the counter, then placed the rest in the trash, because 69 years had taught me that waiting for people who are not coming is a choice, not an obligation. I turned off the kitchen light and sat in the living room in the dark for a while. Not crying. Past crying, really. I just sat there letting the quiet settle around me like something familiar and unexpectedly kind. My name is Dorothy. I spent 31 years as a registered nurse at a hospital in Houston, watching people fight for their lives with every breath they had left. I raised my son Kevin alone after his father walked out when Kevin was 4 years old. I worked night shifts and morning shifts and double shifts and still managed to show up for every school play, every baseball game, every parent-teacher conference. I did not do it so someone would owe me. I did it because he was mine, and I loved him. That is what love looks like when it is real. It does not keep a ledger. It does not know how to stop giving, even when it should. That was always my problem. Kevin had been struggling financially since his second year of marriage to Brielle. She was not a bad person, exactly. She was the kind of woman who believed comfort was something owed to her rather than earned, and Kevin had slowly, quietly adopted her worldview the way you adopt the habits of whoever you spend the most time with. They lived in a house in Katy that was too large for their income. They drove 2 cars that required payments they could not reliably make. Brielle got her nails done weekly, and her hair professionally styled every 3 weeks. And I knew these details not because I judged them, but because Kevin told me each time he needed help covering something else. The first time I helped, Kevin was 32 and the water bill had gone unpaid for 2 months. $500. Easy enough. A mother does not hesitate for $500. Then came the car insurance. Then the credit card, minimum payments. Then the down payment on the Katy house, which I had co-signed with my name and my credit and my retirement savings as collateral. I told myself it was an investment in their stability. I told myself that eventually the boat would right itself. People say that about water rising around them too. By the time my birthday arrived and no one did, I had given Kevin and Brielle approximately $60,000 over 7 years. Not loaned. Given. The word loan had stopped applying somewhere around year 3, when Kevin first looked at me with that particular expression, the one that told me he had never once considered repayment a real possibility. Brielle had never asked how I was. Not once. In 8 years of being my daughter-in-law, she had not asked a single time how I was feeling, how my knee was holding up after the surgery, whether the drive from my house to theirs was getting harder on my back. She asked for things. She spoke to me in a tone reserved for service workers when they were slow. She smiled at me at family gatherings the way you smile at furniture that is mostly in the way. And Kevin let her. That was the part that wore on me like a stone in a shoe. He let her. I was still sitting in the dark living room when my phone buzzed. A text from my granddaughter Emma, Kevin's daughter from a brief relationship before Brielle. She was 15 and lived with her mother most of the year but spent summers with Kevin. She had my eyes and her grandfather's stubbornness, and she was the most honest person I had ever known. Happy birthday, Grandma. I made you a card. Can I bring it Sunday? I felt something loosen in my chest. Not everything, just enough. Of course, sweetheart, I typed back. I would love that. She sent a string of small yellow hearts. I held the phone against my chest for a moment, like it weighed something important. That night, I did not sleep well. I lay in the same bed I had slept in for 22 years, in the house I had paid off with nursing wages and careful saving, and I stared at the ceiling and thought about the thing I had been avoiding thinking about for months. A letter had arrived 6 weeks earlier from a bank I did not recognize. It was addressed to me, and it referenced a personal loan in my name, a loan I had not taken out. The amount was $43,000. I had called the bank the next morning and spoken to a representative who read me the application details with cautious professionalism. The address on the application was mine. The Social Security number was mine. The signature, she said, appeared to match my records, but I had not applied for any loan. I had not signed anything. I asked her to flag the account as disputed and told her I would come in person within 2 weeks. I had not gone yet. I had been waiting for a reason I could not quite name. Maybe I was hoping the explanation would arrive on its own. Maybe I was afraid of what I would find when I looked directly at it. The birthday that no one came to was the last time I waited for anything to arrive on its own. I got up before the sun. I dressed carefully, the way my mother taught me. When you are walking into something difficult, you put yourself together properly because the way you carry yourself matters even when everything else feels loose. I made coffee. I found the bank letter in the folder in my desk drawer. I placed it in my purse alongside my own financial records, my identification, and a notebook I had been keeping for the past 4 years. The notebook contained dates and amounts, every transfer, every check, every cash advance I had pulled out at an ATM and pressed into Kevin's hand in a grocery store parking lot when Brielle could not know. It was not something I had planned to use. It was something I had started keeping the way you keep a flashlight in a drawer hoping you never need it, but knowing that darkness is always a possibility. The bank opened at 8:30. I was there at 8:15, sitting in my car in the lot, watching the morning settle over the strip mall with its familiar Texas flatness. The sky was wide and pale and indifferent. I appreciated that about the sky. It never pretended. Inside, a young woman with a professional smile directed me to the office of a loan officer named Gerald Park. He was around 50, compact and careful, the kind of man who listened before speaking. I liked him immediately. I placed the letter on his desk. Then I placed my notebook beside it. He read the letter first, then opened the notebook and scanned the first several pages without a word. After a few minutes, he looked up. "Mrs. Dorothy," he said, "tell me what you know about this loan." "I know I did not take it out," I said. "And I believe I know who did." He did not flinch. He had seen versions of this before. I could tell by the way he reached for his keyboard without hesitation. We spent the next 40 minutes going through the application record together. The loan had been applied for online, using my name, my Social Security number, my home address. The listed purpose was home renovation. The funds had been deposited into an account that was not mine, a joint account, he told me carefully, that listed me as a secondary account holder alongside another name, Kevin's name. I sat very still. I had not given permission for any joint account. I had not signed anything. Someone had used my information and added their name to an account built in my identity. "I would like to report this as fraudulent," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Gerald nodded once and began typing. "I will need you to complete a fraud report and provide the documentation you have. We will freeze the loan account immediately and open an investigation. If the funds have already been dispersed, recovery will depend on what the investigation finds, but your liability will be significantly reduced once the fraud claim is filed." "All right," I said. "I also want to let you know," he added, adjusting his glasses, "that there is a secondary loan on your credit file. Smaller amount, similar pattern. Filed 8 months ago." I looked at him. 22,000, he said quietly. The room was very quiet for a moment. "Show me," I said. We worked through it all. 2 fraudulent loans, a joint account I had never authorized. My credit score had dropped 41 points. I filed the fraud reports for both accounts, provided the documentation, and gave Gerald my notebook with permission to copy any pages relevant to the investigation. When I stood to leave, he extended his hand. "I am sorry this happened to you," he said. "I am sorry I let it take this long to look at it," I said. I drove home slowly. My hands were on the wheel, but my mind was moving through something larger and quieter than anger. I had spent 31 years in emergency rooms. I had seen people arrive in crisis, and I had learned that the moment of crisis is not the time to fall apart. You fall apart later, in a supply closet, in your car, in a parking lot at 11 at night where no one is watching. First, you move. First, you do what needs doing. I picked up the phone and called my attorney. Her name was Carol Simmons, and I had used her twice, once for my will 20 years ago, and once when a billing dispute with my former employer required a professional voice. She was practical and direct, which was exactly what I needed. "I need to revise my will," I told her, "and I need to do it today if there is availability." There was availability at 2 o'clock. I spent the hour before the appointment sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold in front of me. I had loved Kevin for 35 years. I had loved him the way you love something that came from the deepest part of you, without condition, without logic, without calculation. I was not angry at him the way you are angry at a stranger. I was heartbroken the way you are heartbroken by someone who was supposed to know better. Someone you raised to be better. But love that costs you your safety is not love anymore. It is something else. It is a habit you have forgotten to examine. Carol's office was on the second floor of a building in Sugarland that smelled of old carpet and good intentions. She was in her 60s, silver-haired, with reading glasses perpetually balanced at the end of her nose. She waved me into her office without ceremony and listened to everything I had to say without interrupting. When I finished, she removed her glasses, set them on the desk, and folded her hands. "Do you want to tell me what you want the will to reflect now?" "Remove Kevin entirely," I said. "And Brielle. Everything goes to Emma." Carol looked at me steadily. "Emma is 15. I know how old my granddaughter is," I said gently. "Set up a trust. Managed by an independent trustee. She receives access at 25. Until then, the trustee makes decisions in her interest." Carol nodded slowly. "And the house? The investment accounts? Everything," I said. "The house, the retirement accounts, the savings, all of it into the trust for Emma." She picked up her pen. "I want to make sure you understand what you are choosing, Dorothy. This is a significant decision." "I know," I said. "I am 69 years old. I have been making significant decisions alone my entire life. I have gotten very good at it." Something in her expression shifted, not quite a smile, but close. We spent 90 minutes on the documents. With each page I signed, I felt something returning to me that I had not realized I had surrendered. Not victory, not revenge, something quieter and more durable. Ownership of my choices, my resources, my future. When the last signature was done, Carol gathered the documents and tapped them into a neat stack. "Is there anything else you need from me today?" "Not today," I said. "But I may need you again soon." She looked at me over her glasses. "I will be here." I drove home in the early Texas evening, the sky turning amber over the highway. My phone had been silent all afternoon, which meant Kevin and Brielle did not yet know anything had changed. The accounts were frozen. The fraud reports were filed. The will was revised. But their lives were still continuing as if the ground beneath them was solid. That would change by morning. I was in the kitchen making dinner when the first call came. Kevin's name lit up the screen and I let it ring through to voicemail. Then Brielle. Then Kevin again. I put the phone face down on the counter and finished cooking my soup. By 8 o'clock, the messages had piled up enough that I could read their shape without opening them. Something had been declined. The pattern was always the same: confusion first, then the demand for an explanation, then the pivot to outrage once confusion failed to produce results. I did not respond. I went to bed at 10 and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, they arrived without calling ahead. I heard the car first Kevin's truck pulling into my driveway with the specific aggression of someone who believed urgency was an argument. I was at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee when the knocking started. I opened the door. Kevin stood on the porch, his jaw tight, his eyes doing the thing they did when he was trying to appear calm, while everything inside him was moving fast. Brielle was 2 steps behind him, arms crossed, wearing sunglasses indoors, as if the Texas morning light required shielding from. She looked at me the way she always looked at me, as if I were a problem to be managed. "Mom," Kevin said, "we need to talk." "Come in," I said. I stepped back and let them pass. They stood in my living room without sitting. Brielle looked around the room. "Every account is frozen," he said. The joint he stopped. "Say it," I said. He looked at me. "The one you opened in my name," I said quietly. "Without my permission." Silence. Brielle's expression shifted. Just slightly, the way a person's face shifts when they realize the person across from them knows more than they expected. Kevin opened his mouth, then closed it. "The bank loan," I said, 43,000, and the second one, 22. Both in my name, both without my knowledge or consent. I filed fraud reports on both of them yesterday morning. "Mom," "That is not," Kevin started. "Do not tell me what it is," I said. My voice was level. 31 years in emergency medicine had taught me that the moment you raise your voice, you lose the room. Tell me how my signature ended up on 2 loan applications I did not fill out. Tell me how my social security number appeared on an account I never authorized. Kevin's face had gone the color of old paper. Brielle's mouth had tightened into a straight line. "We were going to pay it back," Kevin said. His voice had gone small. We were behind on everything, and I knew you would say no if I asked, and I thought if I could just get ahead." "You thought," I said. "Mom, you used my identity," I said. "My credit. My name. My name. Kevin. I earned that name. I built that credit score over 40 years of never missing a payment, never borrowing more than I could repay, never asking anyone to carry a weight that was mine. You used it without asking me, without telling me, without giving me the choice." Brielle spoke for the first time. "This is an overreaction. Families share finances all the time." I looked at her for a long moment. "You have never asked me how I was," I said. "Not once. In 8 years. You have never asked if my knee bothered me, if I was sleeping well, if I was lonely after 31 years of nursing and no one left to come home to. You have never asked, but you have taken. Every time something was needed, the answer was somewhere in my account. And I let that happen because I thought it was love. I was wrong." Brielle looked away. Kevin sat down heavily on the couch. He put his elbows on his knees and stared at the floor. "The will has also been revised," I said. "Both of you have been removed. Everything goes to Emma." Brielle's head snapped back toward me. "You cannot do that." "I already did," I said. "She is a child. She is a child who texted me happy birthday when no one else did," I said. "She is a child who has never asked me for a single thing except my time. She will be 25 when she receives access to anything, and in the meantime it will be managed by a trustee who has no personal interest in spending it." Kevin's shoulders were shaking. Not with anger. "Mom," he said. His voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry." The room was very quiet. Brielle shifted on her feet, glancing toward the door as if calculating the distance. She was not a woman who remained in rooms where she was losing. "I am going to wait in the car," she said. Neither Kevin nor I acknowledged that she had spoken. After a moment, the front door opened and closed. Kevin sat with his face in his hands for a long time. I sat across from him in the chair by the window, the morning light coming through the curtains, and I waited. "I don't know when I stopped being your son," he said finally. "You are still my son?" I said. "That is not the part that changed." He looked up at me. His eyes were wet and ashamed in a way I had not seen since he was 9 years old and had broken the kitchen window with a baseball and tried to lie about it. I convinced myself it wasn't that bad, he said. That you had enough. That you wouldn't miss it. That someday I would pay it all back and you would never even need to know. He swallowed hard. I didn't let myself look at what I was actually doing. That is the most honest thing you have said to me in several years, I said. He closed his eyes. How do I fix this? You cooperate with the bank investigation, I said. You tell them exactly what happened, and you accept the consequences. That is the beginning. And us? He asked. Can we fix us? I looked at my son, this person I had loved before he was a person. When he was just a possibility, a hope, a heartbeat I felt for the first time in a cold examination room and could not stop thinking about for the rest of my life. I am not walking away from you, I said carefully. But I am no longer going to stand in a place where I can be reached without my permission. You have to build something real, Kevin, with your own hands, your own money, your own choices. I cannot do that for you anymore. I was wrong to think I could. He nodded slowly. It was not the nod of someone who understood everything. It was the nod of someone who understood enough to begin. He stood after a while and moved toward the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. Emma loves you, he said. You should know that. She talks about you more than anyone else in her life. I know, I said. She is the reason some days are easier than others. He stepped outside without looking back. I heard his truck start and pull away from the curb, slower than it had arrived. I stood at the door for a moment and breathed the morning air. It smelled like cut grass and distant rain. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor's sprinklers were running. Sunday came with a sky full of high white clouds and the particular gentleness that Texas mornings sometimes produce before the heat takes over. Emma arrived at 11, her backpack over one shoulder, her grandmother's eyes in her face. She held out an envelope when I opened the door. I made it myself, she said. Well, I printed the background, but I wrote everything inside. I opened it at the kitchen table while she sat across from me and pretended not to watch. The card had a picture of two hands, one old, one young, and inside she had written in her careful, precise handwriting, "Not because nothing ever hurt you, because everything did, and you are still here." I held the card for a long time without speaking. Emma poured herself a glass of orange juice from the refrigerator with the ease of someone who knew where things were kept, who had always been welcome here. Dad called me, she said, sitting back down. He told me what happened. What did he tell you? That he made mistakes. Big ones. She turned the glass in her hands. He cried on the phone. I've never heard him do that before. No, I said. Not for a long time. She was quiet for a moment. Are you okay, Grandma? I am better than I have been in a while, actually. She looked up at me. Because you stopped letting them do it? I studied her. 15 years old. She saw things so directly that sometimes it almost took my breath away. Yes, I said. Because I stopped. She nodded, satisfied. Then she reached into her backpack and produced a battered deck of cards. Can we play rummy? I've been practicing. You have been practicing so you can beat me, I said. Obviously, she said, already shuffling. We played for 2 hours at that kitchen table, in the warm Sunday morning light, with the windows open and the sounds of the neighborhood drifting in. She beat me the first game. I beat her the next 2. We argued pleasantly about the rules and laughed about nothing in particular, the way people laugh when they are exactly where they are supposed to be. When she left in the early afternoon, she hugged me in the doorway for a long time. She was nearly as tall as me now. She had her whole life arranged ahead of her like a room she had not yet walked into. Same time next week? She asked. Same time next week? I said. I watched her walk down the driveway to her mother's waiting car. her backpack bouncing slightly with each step. She turned at the end and waved. I waved back. Then I went inside, closed the door gently, and stood in the quiet hallway of my house. My house, paid for with my hands, my years, my sleepless nights and early mornings, and every ounce of discipline I had built before the word discipline meant anything to me. It had always been mine. I had simply forgotten to act like it. The days that followed were not dramatic. Healing rarely is. It happens in small, unremarkable increments. A morning you wake up, and the first thought is not dread, a phone call you feel no obligation to answer, a bill you pay without wondering whether someone else's emergency will require you to redo the math. Kevin and I spoke twice that week. Short calls, careful ones. He was working with a financial counselor and had begun the process of speaking with the bank's investigation team. He did not ask me for anything. I noticed that. Brielle did not contact me. I did not expect her to. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from Carol Simmons confirming that the trust had been formally established and that all documents were on file. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer where I kept the things that mattered. One morning I drove to the hospital, where I had worked for 3 decades, not for any reason, just to see it. I parked in the lot and sat looking at the building for a while. I thought about all the nights I had walked through those sliding doors towards something urgent, something that needed everything I had. I thought about all the times someone had said, in the dim language of crisis, "I don't know what to do," and I had said, calmly and without performance, "We are going to figure that out together." I had known how to be steady for strangers in the worst moments of their lives. I had forgotten, somewhere along the way, to be steady for myself. I started the car and drove home. The evening was warm and the neighborhood was quiet in the way it gets just before the cicadas start up. I sat on the porch for a while with a glass of sweet tea and let the day come down around me. A dog was barking 2 streets over. A child's bike was leaning against the house across the street, left there by someone who expected to come back for it. I was 69 years old. I had raised a child alone. I had stood on the cold floors of emergency rooms for 3 decades and held people's hands while they faced the worst hours of their lives. I had given and given until giving became invisible to me, until I forgot that I was doing it, until it simply became the shape of my existence. And then, one birthday, alone with a candle going cold in a store-bought cupcake, I remembered that the shape of my existence was something I still had the power to change. Nobody gave me that power. I had always had it. I had just stopped reaching for it. There is a particular kind of freedom that arrives not with noise, but with silence, not with a dramatic gesture, but with a series of quiet, deliberate choices made before the world wakes up. I found mine at a bank window at 8:15 in the morning in a parking lot that smelled like asphalt and possibility. I found it across a desk from a patient attorney who waited while I found the words. I found it at a kitchen table with a 15-year-old who knew how to shuffle cards and love without conditions. You do not always know the moment you decide to come back to yourself. Sometimes it arrives as a birthday no one shows up for. Sometimes it arrives as a letter in a name you recognize as your own. Sometimes it is simply a night so quiet that there is finally nothing left to drown out the truth. I am not the woman I was a year ago. I am not harder, exactly. I am clearer. I understand now that the people who love you and the people who rely on you are not always the same people. I understand that generosity without boundaries is not a virtue. It is a slow erosion. I understand that my name, my credit, my house, my savings, my time, my patience, none of these are things I owe to anyone simply because I love them. I walk into each morning now with a steadiness that took me 69 years to earn. Emma calls on Sundays. Kevin is learning, slowly, what it means to stand on his own. The house is mine. The future is mine. The quiet is mine. And if you have ever sat alone with a cold candle and wondered whether you have the right to want more than that, I want you to know that you do. You always did. You just have to be willing to stop waiting for someone else to tell you so. Before you go, I would love to know, what is the one thing in your life right now that you have been too patient about? And where are you watching from today?